Hey, welcome back to the podcast. Today I'm talking to Jason Hornung. Jason is the founder and creative director of JH Media LLC. His proprietary methods for ad creation, audience selection, and scaling are responsible for producing over $20 million of profitable sales for his clients every year. He is known as the guru to the gurus because he's the mastermind behind the hugely profitable campaigns for marketing legends such as Mike Dillard, Kern, Ryan Deiss, Neil Patel, Grace Lover, and Sam Ovens, and much more. Let's dive into our conversation with Jason. Jason, what's up, man?
Hey, how you doing, Raul?
Dude, it's been a while. It's so good to see you again.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing, man. I was just thinking back to when we worked together and how much I enjoyed that. So it's cool to watch you like navigate your own way through business and build what you've built and stuff like that. I always love, seeing people that have come through working with me go off and do their own things. So good
That's
on
a
you.
cool experience. That's a really cool experience. Cutting the teeth, really honestly, it's just like with the clients that we were working with and the strategies that you developed and just learning from your insights and some questions that I still want to ask here to dive into, but I wouldn't have any other way to cut my teeth that way. It's 100 miles an hour, super fast, all at once. So that's one way to
Yep.
learn, right? A
Uh-huh.
sink or swim.
Yep. That's right. That's what we do.
That's
Well,
hilarious.
fire away with your questions, man. Let's dive right into it.
Well, I'm pretty curious. One of the things that I mean, you know this, we talk to clients about it, and things that we're seeing in the market is there's offers and then there's just like seasonal trends that people make. But like the cool thing about what you've built with AOA is that this thing's been selling. I don't know if it's almost been 10 years now, but like just your thoughts on reviving the offer, continually keeping up with market trends. Cause a lot of people that I talk to, like they change their offer, like they change their socks, or they're looking at
Yeah.
like different seasonality. Just I want to get your perspective on that.
Yeah, so I mean, let me compartmentalize that into two things, right?
Hmm.
So I'm going to first address the comment you made about changing the offer more than they change socks, right? Because that actually addresses a bigger picture mindset issue that people have where they try to redo an entire thing, especially based off of far too little amount of data.
Mhm.
So there's a problem with a lot of people like that try to make an offer, even experienced people with maybe media buying or being a part of some aspect of an offer that works. Because usually a lot of people will maybe be on a sales team and part of an offer, and then they go and they try to make their own and they fail at it. Or they were the media buyer, and then they can't make it work for themselves when
Yeah.
they do their own offer, right? There's a lot of those experiences out there. So you got to understand that it's an entire process, right?
Mhm.
And a lot of people overvalue their one part of the process and they don't understand all the other components
Hmm.
that go into the entirety of making an offer work. And that entirety is going to vary depending on what kind of offer you got, like what business model are you functioning under?
Yeah.
Because we got all kinds of people here from e-commerce all the way to we're selling big ticket products over the phone. So all that kind of stuff is going to affect how what you should expect from an offer. How are you going to go about an offer? How do you optimize an offer? There's a lot of moving pieces and different components that are going
Fill
to
in the
be
back
going
end.
on, and they're variable. Yeah, they're variable by business model too.
Yeah, it's not
Yeah.
one answer shoots all. The interesting point that I do want to double click on is you mentioned the time component and enough data. I know that is also variable too, depending on how strong your marketing or how many people you got eyes on that offer. But can you break it down into three buckets of what's not going to work with the data that you have? It's, let's say a quarter or 6 months, or it might work, what to do there, or hey, this is a winner. What are some of the things or like the data points or things that you look out for in those three components that could happen with an offer? Because I think we always underestimate how much time it takes to prove it out. And I think people
Yeah.
quit too soon.
What we need to be able to establish is forecasting of what our key performance indicators need to be.
Yeah.
But we also need to have a framework along with that for how much do we spend to validate those KPIs minimally. That's what people are trying to figure out with the question that you asked there, right? And so that's why I got the systems that I've developed over the years. But it's always, let's talk about now when we talk about spend to validate an offer, we have to segment what we're talking about to testing on the ads and testing on the funnel.
Mhm.
And we got to give some generalities, but people need to understand that these generalities are again trying to give you a baseline of what we see typically, but you may need to do something differently, and you need to give yourself the freedom to respond differently to the data points that you're actually getting. Okay.
Okay.
Because there's a lot of times when I give these frameworks like this, people will say, oh, well, Jason said it should be this, or you should let it go this amount. And then they'll
Yeah.
let things run longer than they should because they think they're following my advice, but they're not. Or there's some other clear indicator that the thing's not working right, and we're just wasting money, right? We're
Yeah.
pouring good money after bad, like they say, right? So I try to give people some really clear frameworks across everything. So let's just start under the assumption that we're building an offer completely from scratch.
Okay.
Okay. Because that's going to really be where most of these people that have these problems are coming in from, right? We got an offer, it's completely from scratch. And let's just break it down to marketing agency owners, for example, right now, because we got a lot of people that listen to this, I think, that fall into that.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So, and let's just say that they're selling a typical thing where it's a 3-month deal and they're charging like 3,500 a month, which is basically like 10,000 bucks. So you're making a 10K sale, right? It's pretty average right there. All right. Now, if we're going under that assumption and we're selling this over, the other assumption is we're selling this over the phone like we typically do. So we're going to be doing some kind of like advertising to generate leads to take these calls over the phone. So we got to know what all these numbers are that are going to work. So first off, we have to understand on the back end, what is an acceptable amount of that $10,000 that we stand to collect from the client minimally? If we do our job, we should be getting more, right?
Yep.
They would stay longer, right? But minimally, if we got them under contract, what are our cost structures? Everybody's business model is different, right? So you need to understand that piece. And then you deduct that from that 10K. Then you got to understand, well, what kind of profit am I expecting? Because a lot of times people have an expectation, but when they start doing this math, they might get out of alignment. So after you do that first level of math, you got to understand, okay, well, how much meat is still on the bone? Like how much margin do I still have to play with that I can allocate towards ad spend and still stay within my expected range? So let's say we wanted to make a 4-to-1 return on our ad spend, and it's a $10,000 overall lifetime sale.
Yeah.
Well, then we can spend up to 2,500 bucks. So we need to spend minimally that when we're validating an offer, but I recommend that you spend like at least 2x that with messaging, with the caveat that your front end metrics are working and you're getting people on the phone. Maybe you just haven't closed sales. There's a lot of ifs, buts, candy, and nuts that go along with
So
that.
don't just spend
right?
the 2x, which is one of the things people will just hear. Like, hey, I need to spend 5K. That's what I told. Instead of looking at the metrics to tell you early, shut it off and test something new.
Correct. They don't have these little, they ignore the validation points and they'll just spend.
Yeah.
Okay. So in a funnel like this, now that we understand the process, we have little validation points when we're testing with the ads. So we know going into this, we should spend somewhere in the neighborhood of $2,500 to $5,000 to validate the funnel, assuming that all of our little checkpoints are checking off based on our KPIs and what we expect. Okay. And we're going to start from the ad moving backwards in the process to validate. Okay. So normally in this kind of thing, we might have a VSL as the funnel model, right? So we're going to have an ad go into an opt-in page where then we're going to have people go into a VSL where then they can book on the calendar. Okay.
Yep.
So we need to be able to run all of our numbers to figure out, okay, well, what's going to happen based on what's usual. And I've got training that I give my customers off of this. It's all based off of my experience, but we know off of certain models, like what to expect as a normal range for what'll happen, for how much it's going to cost you to get a lead, and what it's going to do, what your conversion rate on your landing page needs to be, and how many of your leads do you need to get into bookings, what percentage of them need to show up, and how many out of those people that show up do you need to close in order to hit your goal.
Exactly.
Okay. Yep. So you basically run all those different numbers, and then that's going to give you a framework for what to expect, because you don't know, because this is all brand new, right? So it's based off of what we see typically out there in this industry after tens of millions of dollars of spend on ads across every model now in the time I've been doing this. So that gives bridges that gap, because that's the excuse I'll hear from people is, well, I don't know, it's brand new. They don't, because they don't run their numbers. They don't even know what to expect. They don't, They don't even know if it's going to actually make money or not with the way that they want it to. There's a lot of times I'll run into people that are come to me with e-com and their expectations are going to make money, and I run the math and their whole model can't make money possibly with the way they were set up.
Oh
They
yeah.
were doomed for failure before they left even run an ad.
Yeah, I think that's the key
So
thing too, is like you're going into an unknown space, a variable space, but with this framework, you're able to create concrete steps. So, okay, if I go in here, I know it's going to be different, but at least I know what to do if this, then that. But the if this, then that's that you can control. It's not, you can't control everything. But once
correct. So there's all these key points, right? These are the ifs, ands, and buts, right? But we assign data points to them of, okay, well, if this were to occur exactly the way we want, it's going to give us the result that we want.
Mhm.
Now, then we start to measure, is this whole thing working the way that we want it to or not? And if it's not, then what we do is we use the actual numbers that we get for those different data points and we compare them to our projections,
Mhm.
okay, our forecasted numbers. And if it's underperforming in an area, now we know a point of potential failure because we forecasted based on what do we normally see, right? So let's say we normally see a 20% conversion rate on an opt-in page for a VSL. And we go, oh, our cost of our lead is too high. And we compare our actual performance of our funnel, it might be like 10% conversion rate on the
Yeah.
opt-in page, right? And so now that we know that we projected 20 based on conservative estimates and we're only getting 10, we have quite a bit of room for potential improvement there. It gives us a high indicator that's a potential point of failure. And then if we, like, let's say we're getting a $20 lead and we wanted $10
Mhm.
and we're getting a 10% conversion rate and we expected 20 and we know we can get that. Well, if we improve the landing page and get that conversion rate from 10% to 20%, we double the conversion. If our cost of the traffic stays the same, if we don't change the ads, our lead cost will get cut in half. So it'll go from $20 to $10 in that
Yeah.
math scenario, right? So, and that's another area where I see a lot of people when they're running offers and they're trying to make this stuff work. Usually, how we define whether it works or not is the economics.
Yeah.
It's not whether it sells or not. When we bring, sometimes it is. Sometimes people don't sell shit. Then it's just an offer problem at
Yeah.
that point.
Yeah.
It's really clear. But most people have gotten at least a few sales of something. You know what I mean? They're not bringing more money in than what they've spent to that
Yeah.
point. And it feels like they're continuing to spend on something that has no chance, and they're not clear on what to do.
That is the key
Yes.
pain point right there. The offer's validated, or you've made some sales, but you're still figuring out the soup mess of marketing. And as what you're alluding to, I wanted to ask you here too, like just from your experience, and we can like maybe brainstorm on this too, is it's just it can feel like it's a lot to do to optimize this, to change that, to show the booking rate, to the close rate, to the opt-in rate, like a lot of things to happen that need to do. What are and the thing that I like to do is create sobering expectations of what's reality. And sometimes when I'm having
Mhm.
client calls, okay, this is the thing, but just because you pour money into it doesn't mean it's going to pour money back out. Like you have to have those conversations, especially with startups. What would you say is this is hard, but like to test the offer, to test things, to create a marketing acquisition channel, what are some of those hidden costs that people overlook besides just ad spend? What are those additional costs that you recommend to budget into to have a sobering moment?
Well, I guess it's going to vary depending on business model, right? By the time people come to me, we're going to assume that they're already in a business model. They already have all their technology and stuff like that built. And they're just like, hey, I want to grow this with ad spend. In general, across all business models, I'll tell people like you should expect to spend at least $10,000 to $20,000 testing traffic and different
Mhm.
things. And now this is going to be assuming that they are in a spot where they've never had paid traffic working before. If I told that to somebody that was already running ads when they came to me, they'd be like, what the hell? But so again, there's going to be some variable to everything, which I think is going to be a big theme of this conversation.
There's no one answer to everything.
No, no, but it's key to make these distinctions when we're having these discussions with the kind of audience that we're talking about. I always like to help them understand like what kind of scenarios would you use a different
The
idea. And
frameworks. Yeah.
yeah, exactly.
And I appreciate that too, because I could obviously it's all variable depending on the business model, the niche, the industry, and the offer. But the key thing is all what I'm seeing a lot is we still need more to test. There's still more that needs to be done because some people spend 12K. And they're like, okay, well, it didn't work for 12K. I'm like, okay, well, based on the numbers, you have to spend more just to figure out because you're acquiring data versus I need this
Well,
to work.
it could be an issue of spending more. That would be with the caveat that there was adequate amount of testing being done in the right way in between there. I've seen
Sure.
scenarios where people have spent 12 grand on something that had no chance in hell of working, and it was clear of that with $1,000 a
From the
spend.
get. Yeah.
Yeah, if they knew what they were really analyzing, right? But some people will just let things go because they don't care or they don't know any better. There's a wide variance of that as well, right?
Yeah.
So, and then the question becomes, well, how much is enough to test? Well, then that's always going to come down to that is completely circumstantial.
Mhm.
It's going to always be driven by the data, which is why I just went through that whole framework of developing the KPIs.
Yeah.
And I walked through an example of what they would be, because you got to know what these areas need to be. And then you had talked about, well, you get lost in that soup of this stuff. And that's why I said you look at the comparables, right?
Mhm.
And you might have multiple points of failure. I call this point of failure optimization. So
Hmm.
you compare your actual KPIs to your forecasted KPIs, right?
Okay.
And if your entire machine that you've built is not giving you your expected outcome, okay, then what you do is you compare your forecasted numbers to your actuals. And you're going to see that there's going to be one or more point of failure in the
Yeah.
process compared to your forecasted numbers. Then what you do is you filter the KPIs from highest lever to lowest,
Yep.
right? Which one, if we fix it, is going to move the needle in the right direction and possibly get us into our goal just by changing that one thing? Because that's usually the case that you can do that, right? Like, now I had given the example earlier of doubling the opt-in rate,
Yeah.
right? By optimizing there. Oftentimes it's just something that we need to do on the landing page that we're sending traffic to, where that usually is the biggest lever. Now it's going to vary depending on business model and stuff like that. Yeah. But what we do is we look at these KPIs and we look at the comparatives, and then we look at it through a lens of, well, how much room do we have to improve? What are some things that we could do to improve in that area? And what's the likelihood that we're going to achieve that objective? Those are the kind of key triumvirate we look at there.
Yeah.
And then if it qualifies where, hey, we could easily make a big swing here, and when we rerun our numbers, that'll get us into our goal, then that's the one thing we focus on. And so that eliminates the work on all the other things and that distraction, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's a matter of, first you got to be able to understand your numbers, and you got to have a way to get over the, well, I don't know what to expect.
Yep.
And so then once you've got your actual numbers, then if your thing, when you run your test, isn't working the way that you want with your initial set of data, which is always going to be minimally 1x KPI. So if we're starting from scratch, and let's say our goal is to get $500 a sale, right?
Okay.
In a high ticket environment again, right? Because we want to be profitable day one over that $2,500 we're going to collect for people, right?
Mhm.
So then we got to spend at least $500 minimally on that first piece, assuming that things are working, right? Let's say we started spending, we spent we put $100 a day budgets. We're like, we want to get that money out in 5 days, right?
Yeah.
And we spent $100 the first day, and we don't get a single opt-in for our VSL
Yeah. Something's
in that
broken.
example we gave. Yeah, then something's bad. We got to shut that down. We're not going to just let it keep spending $500. But
Exactly.
again, that's what people do, and that's how they burn money, and that's where they misunderstand the caveat of these things, right? Yeah, we're going to let us spend $500 if it's given us leads within our forecasted KPI. So let's say we forecasted $10 a lead, we spent $100, and we got $10 a lead in the first day or better, right?
You let it run.
Now, yeah, then we're going to keep letting it run, because we know that the system is working the way that we want it to, and it hasn't spent enough yet to validate the entire thing.
Exactly.
Okay, so that's the first checkpoint that we look at, is the first key conversion piece. And so after our first day of spend, we check that checkpoint.
Yep.
Right, and that's when we're going to determine, do we let it keep passing? How we determine whether it passes or not: does it meet KPI? If it meets KPI or it's doing better, we let it pass. If
Clear to
it
go.
doesn't, now we got to start asking questions. Okay, well, how far out of KPI is it? Maybe we were trying to get $10 a lead, and we look at it and it's $11.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? In that case, we might just be like, well, fuck it, we're just going to let it run. You know what I mean? Like it's close enough. And sometimes these things get better, right?
Yeah.
Now it might be $20 lead. Now we're like, well, that's too much because that's going to put us at $1,000 a sale. So
Yeah.
we got to do something about it. So now we got to kind of dig into like structure of the campaign, how things were set up, what are the results inside of there. And we're always looking first to clean things up and see if we can clean things up and make it work with what's cleaned up within
Yeah.
our numbers. And then we go from there.
Yeah. Makes a ton of
Right.
sense. And it's adding, again, like we're talking about, giving when you're walking into the dark room, giving like at least a spotlight to know where to look and giving you more accuracy. I want to pivot a
Correct.
little bit into another portion of the things that I've seen you do, which is pretty cool. Like when you started the agency and grew, did you know you were going to build your own IP from that and then leverage that to do what you're doing today? Because you're essentially like you've built the brainchild AOA from experience, from the things that you're doing, from like battle testing and actually being in the trenches. What was that mindset of yours as you were building, doing the work, but then also building the IP? And just like share that because I think a lot of people find that valuable. Like, how do I create IP with the work that I'm doing, and how does that IP become valuable to me and others down the line?
Yeah. So when I got into, I guess what led me into the online marketing space to begin with was getting on Dan Kennedy's planet. So that was when I was an insurance agent. I got Ultimate Sales Letter. Yeah, it's right here, actually.
Here it
In
is.
2005. Yeah, this book right here. And I bought it. And in this book, Dan convinced me that if I could learn how to write copy, I could, as with a college dropout, which I was at the point, I
Mhm.
could learn how to, and I still am, I could control my income with learning how to write copy. And he was
Mhm.
right ultimately. But this is what, and then I got in his newsletter after doing this because this taught me how to write sales letters that I would mail to insurance leads. And I got my phone ringing off the hook instead of having to cold call people. Right.
Nice.
This is how I got my copy chops. But I was on his newsletter as well. And they started talking about internet marketing. And that's what got me down the path of doing that. So like Dan always talks about making IP
Hmm.
out of your work, and he was selling information at the time.
Okay.
So I always wanted, along with being able to write the copy, I wanted to have some kind of information product that I could use to have income coming in. So when the agency started working and that started blowing up, I wasn't going to make courses like immediately. The first videos and stuff that I started making were actually for my team,
Hmm.
and I put them on YouTube, and I didn't block them or anything or make them private, and people found them, and then I started getting messages from people about how much money they were making from following my videos,
Dang.
right?
Okay.
Yeah. No, I had tried to do different information products, but before that, but I had at this point I was really focused on my agency. And
Yeah.
then when that started happening, I knew that was the right time. And this was back in 20
Hmm.
was when this happened, right? So and then I knew it was the time and there was the space where I could jump in and turn these videos that I was making into courses. So that was
Mhm.
how I made my first course that I released in 2013, which was the ultimate guide to Facebook ads.
There you
And
go.
I can't remember how many units I sold of that, but that ended up getting turned into Facebook Ads Bootcamp 1.0, and
I
now I'm
took
on the
2.0.
3. Yeah, yeah, you
Yeah.
did. Yep. I'm on the
2.0 was a
3.0 version
king.
now.
Oh, dang, look at you.
Yeah.
Dude, I'm not gonna lie,
Yep.
like 2.0 still use these principles from that to date.
Yeah.
It's legit. It's pretty cool how one thing can change your life. Learning that skill set
Yeah.
and that insight.
Yeah, it's crazy. Like we had a lot of people buy that course over a couple of years, and so many stories like that. I just love hearing that. And I do the same thing, but the foundations are all the same. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? Like 3.0 is largely just hey, here's what the new stuff looks like. Here's some little changes that we do differently based on things they've removed or didn't remove. And mostly telling people not to follow what Facebook says with their warning messages.
Oh yeah, I hear that. I hear that for sure. No, and then it's really cool because I mean, just to give you context, like when I'm working with consultants or like marketing people, and they want to create something, but I think it's both in tandem. Like you just gleaning on the insight here, the agency had to work first. You had to deliver the results, blow that, continue to grow that, and then lead with your ideas around here's how it actually works, and then and then help. I mean, deliver results through that way. It can't be the other way around where you are trying to make it work as a thought leader first, build the services as you're doing it. I think it's a backwards approach. Like you got to put in the time, you got to cut your teeth into it, you got to find the new nuances that make you different and unique. And then from there, build the IP because it does compound. And I mean, how long you been selling like the information? 12 years now, and always in win iteration, like it's third or fourth.
Yeah. Yeah. You're exactly right. That's you hit the nail on the head there. It's people do it in the wrong order, right? Like in this is the thing. There's these people out there that I call them the mofos without the non-nice way,
Yeah.
right? They tell you that you get into this by positioning yourself as a guru. They don't necessarily say that, but you need to be a thought leader and all these other things like you mentioned, right?
Mhm.
And you don't have any credibility to the market if you don't have any experience. And that's when the people like fall victim to buying that message. That's the ultimate conundrum they come into when they go to try to like, before they start, they won't even start because they get in this ethical conundrum of, well, how do I even sell somebody something that I don't even know how to do yet?
Oh,
Or I
yeah.
don't have any proof of experience, right? That comes into play. So that was the same ethical conundrum for me. So when I got going with anything, I either spend my own money on developing the skill or I go get a job in that industry. So I've told a lot of people, if you want to learn media buying, go get a job at an agency, right? Take my course or something, get the skill sets where people know that helps you, and then go apply at jobs and agencies. They can use media buyers all the time,
Yeah.
right? Cut your teeth on somebody else's dollar without you having to build a business and figure out how to position yourself as something you're not without experience that you don't have,
Exactly.
right? You can avoid the ethical conundrums in different ways and get the experience and then break yourself out or decide the industry's not right for you in a way where you don't have to be like, you don't have to burn all bridges and dive all in. I don't agree with that philosophy necessarily. You
Mhm.
know what I mean? I think that there's a lot of ways that people can try something out and maintain an existing income stream or,
Take a small
just
bet.
freedom and yeah, exactly. Exactly. And they can dive into these kinds of things in different ways than just, oh, you got to go start a business and you got to become a fucking guru. You know what I
No,
mean? And
please
you
opt
got
out
to
of
sell
that.
courses. Yeah. Well, it's like all these things get combined together and they just lead to all these different false belief systems. But you're coming back to your point, and I want to emphasize this. I find that getting the experience first, right? And then developing your own methodology. That's what you're going to be able to sell. You don't have any thoughts to share. You can't be a thought leader if you don't have an experience that's generated a methodology that gets a
That's gotten
proven
results.
result.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. And so I'm just a very methodical person when I do things.
Yeah.
And so I'm very analytical. And so I've developed these different frameworks through my own experience that I share with people in AOA for how to make these decisions that began the whole conversation with, right?
It's the
Like
art.
how
Yeah.
much do you, yeah, how much do you spend on this? When do you know like this thing's working or not? How do you determine that? What do you do if something isn't working? Those are the skills that you need to have once you decide you're trying to run this media buying game. And as you said, people get lost in the soup, and it all boils down to them not having a way to forecast their numbers
Mhm.
and not being clear on how to compare what's actually happening to their numbers, validate that information as well, which is another component because tracking can be off. It's another
Oh,
big
it's always off. It's still off. It's 2024 and it's still off.
It's always off. You know why? Is because a large part of it is due to human error, is
I
what
believe
I
that.
find. Yeah, it's in the computer service, customer service industry. They have a term for that. They call it PEEB-CAC.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it stands for problem exists between keyboard and chair.
Oh my gosh. That is so
Yeah.
true. But even to this day, I mean, it's never fully
It's-
accurate.
yeah, it's never gonna be. What I found is like if there isn't a human error in setting it up, if you can get, especially if you're like on e-commerce, they got it cake
Yeah.
because all you need to do is just use the native integrations that the e-commerce platforms do. Shopify is the most popular one. If
Mhm.
you just enter in your pixel number properly according to their instructions and you follow all their setup, your
It's a done
stuff's going to
deal.
be like 90+% accurate. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not going to be wrong. It's going to be as accurate as you'll get. we're able to achieve that same number with 3 key things outside of a Shopify environment on something where you're developing it and you can control the entire environment. So you got to have fast page load. Now we define that usually as 3 seconds or faster, but I'm finding that you really need to get it closer to a second and a half these
Yeah,
days.
1.2. Yeah.
Yeah. Like you need really fast page load time because people will leave your page. And if your page doesn't load before they leave, the pixel can't fire. Okay. So it's not a matter of whether they got blockers or not. The pixel can't fire.
Interesting.
Okay. Yeah. All right. So if that's happening on your thank you pages where your conversion events are supposed to fire, that's doubly bad. Yeah. So you need to have fast firing pages, first of all. Then you want a clean install of your pixel and then the Facebook stuff, because there's actually little buttons people can click in the Facebook events manager settings area where you control your pixel, where we found that people just all of a sudden they decided they were going to click on that thing to say automatically detect events.
Oh, yeah.
So if you got events set up manually in your pixel code and then somebody does that, it'll double fire everything.
That's a huge issue.
Right. And I see that all the time where people are like, I'm getting double reported. And it's because they click that button on there and they set up the event thing manually as well, or they use the custom conversion. And so they're literally creating a double fire. It'll show up in the pixel events as double firing and it'll look like you're doing twice as good as you really are.
That's a problem.
Right? Yeah. So there's just numerous like human error stuff like that, but you need to make sure there's no human error set up. You got a clean install of the pixel, fast firing pages, and you add the conversion API, right? And so as long as you do those things, we observe 90 to 95% data accuracy in the face of iOS 14.
Wow. Okay.
And I'm talking about in terms of conversion data that we see.
Yeah.
Show up in the ads manager.
That's pretty impressive, actually.
Yeah, it works really well if you do that. So like all these like hoo-has about like tracking not being accurate and stuff like that, it's usually because of human error setup is what I've observed after helping like hundreds of people untangle these problems. Along with, you were talking about building software. I've been working on a project for 4 years plus now of trying to solve these problems with a piece of software. So that's why I'm intimately aware of all of these different ways that the tracking breaks. And we've had to make like custom AI and different types of tracking solutions to solve these problems. You just basically take it out of the pixel environment.
Interesting.
Yeah. And so there's ways to track people around the internet across browsers and know exactly what they're all doing without using pixels.
That sounds interesting. You got to send it over to me. I mean, it's not a simple solution with all the tracking that I mean, I'm not a data analyst on that front, but it's not easy to set up even for someone who knows.
That's why it's taken over 4 years now, but we've got it validated with quite a bit of data points across a lot of different markets. And it's been like line item validated, like with downloading spreadsheets of the data.
Oh, wow.
And line iteming them until we've gotten it to as high as the highest we can get is like 99.65, I think, percent accuracy.
I still remember when we accepted 85% accuracy. You're telling me 99.6. That's pretty good.
Yeah. And this is like across multiple traffic sources. It tracks people across different devices. It'll track them across different contact records. If they give you one email for opting in and a different one for buying, which is really common.
Yep.
Right. That was another form of tracking breaking that we were finding, along with a whole bunch of human behaviors that were all like pixel based, which you can resolve that through using non-pixel based tracking methods that also bypass a lot of these laws and stuff like that that drove iOS 14 and those kinds of things. Yeah.
Interesting. Well, we got to do a shout out there, man. Well, hey, where can people go to, one, thank you for being on, and to learn more about what you're up to?
academyofadvertising.com is where they can get the best info and they can learn about what we're doing right now with helping people to figure all this crap out and make money with ads, actually, a lot of times for the first time.
Yeah, no, I hear you. I'll put that link in the show notes, Jason. It's always a pleasure. Thank you for being on, man.
Anytime, dude. Appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to the podcast. If you'd like to get more of these podcasts, please go ahead and subscribe to wherever you're watching or listening to the pod. If you have any suggestions or questions that you want me to answer on the pod, or you have a guest that you want me to interview, please go ahead and email me all of your suggestions and questions at podcast@dogoodwork.io. That's podcast@dogoodwork.io. If you'd like to give me public feedback, you can go on Apple Podcasts, and from there you can leave up to a 5-star review. I would greatly appreciate that. If you like more free resources where you can get my best strategies to help you increase your company's performance and scale profitably, you can get handpicked articles to propel your growth, and you can get trainings and discussions that I give freely online, as well as low-cost resources such as my books and guides. You can get all of that by going to dogoodwork.io/free-growth-resources. 90% of all of these resources are not behind any email opt-in, so you can get instant access by going to dogoodwork.io/free-growth-resources. Now, if you'd like to accelerate your progress and shorten the gap between information and action and start seeing results in your business, let's work together to increase your company's performance and scale profitably and serve more clients without the overwhelm. You can request a free clarity call to see how we can best support you to reach your goals by going to dogoodwork.io/apply. Again, that's dogoodwork.io/apply. As always, it's an honor to be a small part in your journey. This is Raul Hernandez. Do good work.